Surprise. Thank you. Yeah. Whoa, my name's Bob, and I'm still an alcoholic. That was so nice of Osri to talk about me that way. I got out of her car going, a poor woman sat with me in the car for like an hour each way. And so that's why you never saw me again until recently. What a great lead in. Amanda, thank you so much. You are not a suspect. I'll tell you that right now. Her story dovetails so much with mine. Who would have thought you'd find two alcoholics with similar stories in Alcoholics Anonymous? You know, really. This is my sobriety month as well. 2 weeks ago, I celebrated 37 years, thanks to it wasn't so much my work, it was my higher power and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and all of you keeping me honest all these years. So keep me coming back. But my memory is going, and so I brought a security blanket with me. I probably won't use it, but I may forget my own story if I don't. So anyway, I'm going to start this off by this is what because it's my birthday, I've been telling my story at several occasions, so I've had to mix it up so everybody doesn't get bored. So this is new material, but I base the story on a coin that a friend of mine gave me recently. He's a real servant of Alcoholics Anonymous, dedicated, and this means a whole bunch to me. It says, "Grateful I'm not dead." And on the back, it has the Serenity Prayer. I think it's a takeoff of the Grateful Dead, but I'm grateful. I'm going to pass it around if you want to see it, and because it means a lot. And it's so my story is life after death, and that's the story of Alcoholics Anonymous for me. About that. Talked about my early life. When I was 2 years old, I almost died from an ear infection and a high fever, but I didn't. When I was 4 years old, playing cowboys and good guy, bad guys with my younger sister, who was 3 years old. She was the sheriff and I was the outlaw. We had to hang the outlaw. So we threw a belt over the clothes rack, wrapped it around my neck. She couldn't pull the chair out, so she couldn't put it back. And I helped her kick it over, and that's the last thing I remember. She went into the house and was standing in the corner, and my parents happened to be there. They go, what's going on, Elaine? And Elaine, tell us. Robert hung himself. And they ran out and cut me down. And I wonder how many brain cells I killed in that episode. You know, maybe that's why I'm the way I am. I don't know. Couldn't have been all those times I got drunk in the meantime, but that was it. When I was 9 years old, we lived near this air base. My dad was in the Air Force. We lived near this air base, and they used to every now and then throw these little parachutes out with a sandbag on them to see which way the wind was blowing before they dropped their stuff out of their planes. And one landed in our backyard one day. I thought, well, this is great. I'm going to see if parachutes work. So this parachute is about this big around. I mean, and you got to remember, this is a 9-year-old arm, not a old man arm. So it's probably smaller than this. And I got up on the roof and decided I was going to jump off a 2-story building with this parachute. So I took it, filled it full of air and jumped off. And luckily only broke my leg. But that was the kind of kid I was. That was the kind of adult I was. I mean, this was all about lifestyle. When I was 11, I was in the Boy Scouts. And it was a particularly cold night or cold morning, and some tenderfoot was supposed to start the fire, and he couldn't get it going. was supposed to be ready when all the rest of us got up, we elder scouts. But we were out standing around the smoldering embers of this unmade fire when this kid walks up with a can of gasoline and dumped it onto the fire. And we went, no! And just then the flame just shot up into the can, exploded, and the three of us were totally engulfed in fire. I was blind for the next 3 days. Another kid had third-degree burns on his face. Another kid caught the bottom of the can and cut him from ear to mouth. But he didn't die for some reason. I don't know. I don't know why I didn't die, all this stuff. When I was 14, I had a dream. Now, what kind of kids have dreams like this? I dreamt I was going to die by the time I was 30 years old. Why 30? I mean, that was before the late 60s when it was not trust anybody over 30. But that was the number that came to me in my dream, that I was going to be dead by the time I was 30. So I kind of lived my life that way. Not that I wasn't already kind of living it on the edge, but that kind of sealed it for me. It wasn't that I was going to die. We're all going to die. But it was like my death was imminent. I knew that I had about 15 years before I was gone. And it was like the next year that I found alcohol. Some kid, some of you may have heard the story, some kid, we used to hang out at the pool in the summertime, and some kid was walking through a parking lot and there was a convertible, and in the back of the convertible there was this bottle of gin. And this kid snatched it, and he came into the pool and says, "Hey, Bob, do you want to have some gin?" I go, I don't know what gin is. We kind of had a vague idea that gin went in martinis, but we didn't know what went in martinis besides a cocktail olive, right? The little green olives. That was our expertise. So we didn't have any cocktail olives. We didn't even have anything to drink the gin out of other than the bottle. So we got the bright idea to go on a scavenger hunt. So we started knocking on the doors around the neighborhood. "We're on a scavenger hunt. Do you have any Dixie cups or cocktail olives?" And believe it or not, one lady goes, "Yes, but I don't have any cocktail olives, but I have cocktail onions, those little white ones." So now that I'm sophisticated, I know that we weren't drinking martinis. We were drinking Gibsons. So we took that bottle and we went down to the creek. There were three of us. And we had these 5-ounce Dixie cups, and we filled our glasses and passed the bottle around. And then I think I was the first one with enough courage or stupidity to take the first drink. And we put some onions in our other hand, drink in one hand, onions in the other, chugged the drink, popped the onions in our mouth to get rid of the taste, chewed them up. Whoa, that was terrible. And then it was the next guy's turn, and then the next guy's turn, and then the bottle came back to me, and I filled my cup up again. This time I took the sip, and my stomach said, "We're not having any of this." And up it all came, chewed up onions and everything. But being the tough guy that I was, I caught it in my mouth, swallowed it back down. Ooh, bad news. Then the bottle continued around. The third time it came around and I filled that up was a total different experience. I drank that. I didn't drink it fast. I just kind of like sipped it, and it went down my esophagus like syrup. It was thicker. It was warmer. It just felt heavenly. The ends of my fingers and the ends of my toes were starting to tingle by now. God, I must have had 12 or 15 ounces of booze in like 5 minutes. But at that instant, I said, this is the way I want to feel the rest of my life. all of my insecurities. I was a shy kid. We had lived in Germany the same year that Osri moved to the United States. I moved to Germany. So we kind of balanced out the world. So that's why the world didn't get, out of kilter there, because we traded it off in 1960. I forget what I was saying, but anyway, it's not important. We had moved back to the United States, and I was living in Germany, the land of the Beatles. You got to remember, Beatles, before they came here, the Beatles were big in Germany. And we used to dress like the Beatles. We used to wear those Cuban-heeled, pointy-toed boots. And my pants were so tight that you had to cut the seam, the last 6 inches at the bottom, to get them on. And then you would sew them shut after you put them on. And that's the way we dressed. And it was cool with a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up or something and a cigarette in your mouth. I was 13 or something. I didn't smoke, but so when I showed up at the first day of school in this small rural town in Ohio, I wanted to wear my finest clothes. And we had this big family. So, the week before school, we'd all go to the store. My mother would buy us the clothes we were going to wear for the year. That was it. And I showed up at school in all my Beatle finery. And everybody else is in T-shirts and Levi's and tennis shoes. And I went, uh-oh, and they went, who is that guy? We're not having any of it. This guy's a hood. And I just was out in the cold. Luckily, there was some not old timer, but a family that had lived in the community forever that was in my class, and she adopted me right then. She saw how I was being treated. She told everybody I was her cousin who had just moved there and that they should be nice to me. But that only went so far. So I never felt like I belonged. And I was always trying to fit in, find some way to fit in. And I always felt out of sorts. But alcohol took all of that away in that instant. I didn't care anymore. This is the way I wanted to feel. It was freedom. Anyway, I should read the notes. So anyway, came time to go to college, and my parents wouldn't pay for college. They said, when you're 18, you're out of the house. Get a job. If you want to go to school, you better get a scholarship or go in the military and get the GI Bill. But that's it. Boys are out of the house at 18. Girls are out of the house at 21. I was the only one that was out of the house at 18, but I follow rules pretty well, I guess. So I was lucky enough. I was an athlete in school, ran track and played basketball, and I got scholarships in both sports and full rides. But most of the schools were in the northern tier, and I didn't want to go. I was tired of the cold. I didn't want to go north. So I went south, and the only school that was offering me a scholarship south was in Tennessee. So I went to the eastern part of Tennessee, the foothills of the Smoky Mountains. And you know what that is? That's moonshine country. Yes, my destiny. I'm going to moonshine country. And I knew it was serious when every freshman class, their first weekend at school, had to take a tour of the county morgue to see what moonshine did to people. You got to understand how they make moonshine on the cheap. They go out to they scour the streets all week looking for roadkill. They find dead animals, and that's what they throw in the vat because it aids fermentation. And then when they want to distill it, they just unloose the stopper on the bottom of their radiator of their car that they're driving and drain it all out. And then they distill the moonshine through the radiator of the car. So not only is there rust and antifreeze and everything else, maybe they didn't put a lot of antifreeze in their car, but that's what you got. It's just like drugs these days. You don't know what you're buying. I mean, the only rule we had was don't buy it unless the container it was in was clear, so you could see if there was sediment in the bottom. That was our only rule for buying the stuff. But they'd take you to the morgue, and here would be these horribly distended bodies. Just it reminded you of a Civil War movie where everybody's dead on the battlefield, had been laying there for days. They're just bloated and swelled up, and these people had just died. They hadn't laid in some battlefield for days, and that was their version of scared straight.
Yeah.
Well, being the smart alcoholic that I was, I go, well, that's just bad business. Why would you want to kill off your clientele? You got to have higher quality standards. So when I went into business of making alcohol, I took those standards to heart. In our school, what they used to do, you go to the cafeteria and they would serve you canned fruit with every breakfast. So on Monday, you'd get canned peaches. On Tuesday, you'd get canned pears, etc. You might get fruit cocktail. Usually got that near the end of the week. But what they used to do with the fruit that wasn't eaten is they would dump it in this big tub, big vat. And every day, there'd be new fruit added to this bucket. And on Sunday, when most of the kids weren't around, they would serve it as ambrosia. And it was all this mixed fruit. Well, if you've ever eaten week-old fruit, it tastes a little tangy, to say the least. It's starting to go bad. Well, in our minds, we're thinking, well, that's fermentation. We're halfway there to wine. So a couple of friends of mine and I would walk around the cafeteria. Are you going to eat with a bucket? Are you going to eat your ambrosia? If not, put it in the bucket. And we would collect it all. And then we'd go back to our dorm room, and we had this busboy bucket, that you collect dishes and stuff in, shallow thing. And we would put all this fruit in there and add some water and a bag of sugar. And we'd put a towel over the top of it and shove it underneath the bed and come back in a week. And it would be 40 proof wine. Not clear wine, but hey, it was potent. And we used to puke rainbows all weekend. I tell you, it was glorious. But that was our standard. We didn't make a whole lot of money because mainly we just gave it away. But that was that. I had a couple other episodes. I used to treat my hangovers by sweating them out. And I remember I was in college, about 20 years old, and I was out, got a new pair of hiking boots, and I was trying to sweat out my hangover from the night before. And I came across this cliff, and I went, hey, hiking boots? I could be like a mountaineer. Why don't I climb down this 50-foot face of this cliff? Not a good idea. I made it like to the ends, and then my fingernails just peeled off as I went down the face, fell 50 feet, stove my whole sides in. Luckily, some guy was driving by and saw it happen, and he goes, are you okay, pal? I went, oh, did I get a ride? And he gave me a ride somewhere, but I didn't die again. You should throw this in. I've been doing a survey the last few months about near-death experiences. And I'm interviewing people in the AA program and those outside of the AA program. All of the people I've interviewed in the AA program have stories of near-death experiences. Wrecked cars, nearly dying from one thing or another. When I ask my normie friends, they go, what are you talking about? None of them have ever had anything like we've all experienced. I guess it says something. In my 20s, I really hit my stride. When I turned 21, I stopped getting sick when I drank. And it was like carte blanche, license to kill in those days. I was the biggest drinker in town. Everybody knew I was. There were drinking contests, and I'd always get entered into them and never lost. One particular one, I drank a 60-ounce pitcher of beer in 10 seconds. And the guy that they said tied me just poured it over his head. I mean, I was like a pelican. I could open my throat and it just poured down. But this guy, the audience cried foul. There's no way that he got beat. So they said, okay, we'll have a do-over. So they handed me another 60-ounce pitcher of beer and says, let's do it over. I'm sorry I lost a second. It took me 11 seconds to drink that one. But I won the trophy. I still have it. That was the kind of guy I was. And everybody knew it. I had a standing bet around the county, $50 that I could drink a fifth of tequila before you could drink a fifth of anything. You could bring a bottle of wine to the party and I could beat you. So it's amazing. You hear stories about people that die from alcohol poisoning and stuff. Why didn't I? I always told myself, well, I'm just healthier. I'm bigger, stronger, whatever. That's the way an alcoholic mind works. I'm somehow immune. I am not going to die. I'm not 30 yet. I've got time. So, and the medical profession was on my side too. I remember having to take a physical for a job, and they said, your heart is enlarged. And I went, well, yeah, I'm an athlete. And they said, we're worried. And I'm going, well, why would you be worried? I'm so healthy. Well, I know now that enlarged hearts are a bad thing. That's a big, flabby heart that's been pumping around diluted blood. My blood had been so diluted that my heart had to work overtime to try to get enough oxygen and nutrition to my the rest of my body. But I didn't look at that, and the doctors didn't alert me to that either. Right before I turned 30, I was living in Hawaii. I bought a sailboat, sailed to Hawaii with a couple of friends. We were living on it, having a grand old time. And I was learning to scuba dive. And it wasn't the guy that was teaching me, it was his partner. Came to my house one morning at like 7 a.m. and says, we're going diving today. And I'm going, I just got home at like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I was literally still drunk and had cocaine in my system, I'm sure. And the guy goes, don't worry about that. I mean, that was one of the things they told me early on was that you don't drink. I mean, you don't drink before you go diving. Something like at least 12 hours before. Well, this guy took me out and he took me diving. I've never been below 30 feet. He took me in 100 feet of water. And I got down to the bottom and I couldn't breathe. And I was hyperventilating and getting nitrogen narcosis, the bends. And I said, I'm going back to the surface. And he goes, no, it'll be okay. And I went, no, I'm out of air. I'm going back to the surface. And he goes, no, it'll be. I gave him the universal signal and said, I'm going up. And I knew enough to exhale the whole way up so it didn't explode my lungs. But when I hauled myself out on the diving platform, I said, that was close. I'm almost 30. I wonder if I dodged a bullet here, if that was supposed to be my end, and I survived that. So what am I going to do with the rest of my life if this is true? I didn't plan for after this. I came back. I met so many great people in Hawaii. The people with the biggest smiles in Hawaii were all from Seattle. And I said, when I go back to the mainland, I'm going to have to go check this place out where everybody is so happy. And I was here for about a week, and we had one of those Indian summers. The fall weather was beautiful, 70 in the days, and crisp at night. I thought I could live there. Came up here and started working as a bartender down by the water, and my hands started getting stiff. So in those days, they didn't have all the medicines that you have today. It was like aspirin was it. And so I read somewhere if you take aspirin, to deal with that, that was what they prescribed. And I read in another magazine that if you drink it with a shot of whiskey, it gets in your system faster. So I go, this is the perfect remedy for me. So That's what I would do. Every 4 hours, I'd take 2 aspirins and a shot of whiskey. And on the 4th of July, 1981, I was working the day shift. And I used to time my alcoholic stupors to my shift so I could drink for free. So I wouldn't be obviously drunk while I was working, but the minute I got off work, that next drink would take me over the top. They came to me and said, our night shift guy isn't going to make it to work today. You've got to work another shift. Bad choice. So I was already there on the threshold. I had to keep going. Well, I don't remember what happened that night, but somebody had to help me close the restaurant up and everything. But somewhere in the middle of the night, I started throwing up. I threw up every 20 minutes for 16 hours. Somewhere near the end, I started throwing up blood. My girlfriend was freaking out, but my mantra was, if you're going to play, you got to pay. And that this is just the cost of doing business in my world. At the end of this period, my throat was so raw from throwing up that I was having a hard time breathing. And I said, okay, you can take me to the hospital. And on the way there, I threw up a pint of pure blood in a plastic bag. So I walk into the emergency room with this bag of blood, and they just said, get on the table. They called in a specialist. The guy comes in and takes one look at me and heard what I had been doing, and he just turned around and walked out, and he told my girlfriend and another doctor that he's going to die. He's got a 10% chance of living the next hour. I think he's ruptured his esophagus and he's bleeding internally. And when you bleed in your heart-lung cavity, you usually die. If he doesn't die in an hour, then he has a 30% chance of making it the next 30. He didn't tell me any of this. He told her, he just comes back and says, we're going to take care of you. And they shot me up with a bunch of Valium and to make me happy. And that was it. And obviously I didn't die. But it kind of raised some red flags. Even that doctor, I went back to him after I got sober and I said, didn't you ever think that I might have had a problem with alcohol? And he goes, nah. He says, you were just in your 20s having a good time. I'm going, I was in my mid-30s. What are you talking about? And he goes, well, just don't drink for 6 weeks and, till this gets healed and you'll be good. It turned out it was a bleeding ulcer that had been caused by the aspirin, not alcohol. Couldn't have been alcohol. Alcohol is my best friend. It wouldn't do that to me. It was the aspirin that burnt the hole in my stomach. So after 3 weeks, they said, don't drink for 6 weeks. After 3 weeks, they set a camera down my thing and said, we don't see any sign of the problem. So I took that as license to start drinking again. 3 weeks into it. And at the end of 6 weeks, he saw that I was back drinking. He goes, well, this isn't working. I'm going to send you to a therapist, to a psychologist. This guy had me buy a book on how to control your drinking. And the upshot was you kept a 3x5 card, and every time you took a drink, you wrote down what time it was, how much, what kind of alcohol. And then you'd go home at night, and you would plot your blood alcohol. And he had me do this for a week. And on the days when I tried not to drink, I drank at least a pint. On days that it kind of got away from me, I would drink 3/5 or more. That was just the normal lifestyle. That was nothing. That's just what I did. And I came into his office that next day with flip charts about, see how my blood alcohol, I kept my blood alcohol, it never got up till 10 o'clock at night. And he goes, this isn't working. We need to try biofeedback. So he moved me on to something else. Never alcohol. Hello? Nothing. So they gave me an environmentectomy. They called my boss, says he can't come back to work for a month. And I stayed away. But eventually I got a DWI. Went to court. The judge was the only person that saw me for who I was. He wanted to send me to jail. He said, anybody with blood alcohol this high has done it before, and he's been doing it a long time. But the prosecuting attorney and even the arresting officer said, no, he, he shouldn't, and they let me off. So I went to the Yellow Pages. We had Yellow Pages back in those days. I looked under treatment facilities, and I called around. I found the cheapest one, $300 for a 6-month program. That's a good deal. And I went there, and they asked me the first step. So you're powerless over alcohol. And I went, no, I'm not powerless over alcohol. That's why I'm here. You guys are going to show me how to do it right? And they went, okay, move on to this second part of the first step. Your life's unmanageable, right? No. They said, oh, you meant to get that DWI? No. You meant to lose your job? No. Your wife's threatening to leave you? Sounds like your life's kind of unmanageable. And so I didn't know it at the time, and it took me years later to realize that was the beginning of the steps for me. I admitted that my life was unmanageable. But I went back out for 3 years. The other thing they did was they took me to an AA meeting, the old Fremont Hall down underneath the bridge. And I'm assuming most of you never were there, but it was up these dark stairs, wooden stairs, into this big wooden room. And there was a bunch of low-bottom drunks in there smoking and drinking coffee. You'd get there and the room would be fairly clear, but it smelled weird. And at the end of the meeting, when you stood up, your head, all the smoke had gone to the ceiling and had built up. So when you stood up after the meeting, your head was in this fog. And I went, I am not one of these people. And I left and I went and got drunk and said, screw those guys telling me to keep coming back. I'll show them, as I hammered it down. But sure enough, when my half measures didn't pay off, I came back. And I came back to that meeting. I was so desperate already. But I wasn't there yet. I needed half measures. If I ever find the guy that said it's okay to drink 2 drinks, I'm going to punch him right in the mouth, because every time I tried drinking 2 drinks, it turned into way more than that. I mean, it may have been, I'll have 2 drinks after work on Monday. And then on Tuesday, I go, why wait till after work? I can have one of my beers now and another one after work. And then on Wednesday, I go, well, why wait till after work at all? I'll have both of them now. And then after work, I go, well, just one more maybe. And then by Friday, I'd be on my lips, and I go, how did this happen? It was just insanity. But every time I got to that point, I would go to a meeting. I went to the Broadway group because it only was an hour meeting. I was looking through the schedule, finding all the 1-hour meetings, because I couldn't sit through an hour and a half. And I went to the Broadway group. Then I went to A New Beginning down south. At the end of my day, I used to steal booze from my clients. I'd go in their liquor closet to do an inventory, and I'd drink the neck of the bottle. So right to the bottom where the label was, so they couldn't tell that I had taken anything. Yeah, right. Not like the seal wasn't broken or something. But I found myself drunk down in Burien, so I went into A New Beginning. And that's what I did for 3 years. On the last day I drank, and I was down to the dregs. I was drinking wine coolers. Instead of, I figured the lower the alcohol content, the safer I would be. And so wine coolers. And I ran into a fellow that I had met at meetings. He had been friendly to me. And he took one look at me and he says, are you all right? And I knew I couldn't say, yeah, I'm fine, and get away with it. He knew. And that night, I said, no, I'm not. That night, I met another member of the fellowship, and she said, what are you willing to do to make your life better? I said, I'll do anything. She said, are you willing to stop drinking forever? What a concept. All the meetings I'd been to, I'd never heard that in an AA meeting. You had to stop drinking forever? No. And between the question And my answer, I died and was reborn. In the time it took me to say, yes, I am willing to stop drinking forever, I had a white light experience. I literally passed out. I had tunnel vision and almost fell out of my chair. But when I said, yes, I'm willing to stop drinking forever, all of that, everything went away. I felt peace and lightness, and my life started over. The next day I was walking around, okay, now that I'm not going to drink, how do you have fun? How do you live life, How do you dance? How do you meet girls? Oh, you're married. Why would you need to meet girls? Oh, that's right. So, what do they say in AA I need to do? Go to meetings and find a higher power. And I called up my church and said, when's the next service? I want to be there. And that started it for me. I went to my first meeting on a Thursday night. Never used to go to meetings on Thursday night because that's when all the good TV shows were on. Back in the day, it was Cosby and Hill Street Blues. And so I never went on Thursday night. But that Thursday night I went, and for the first time I heard somebody share my story. And I went, it was a woman, an older woman from East Coast. And it couldn't have been more different. But she shared my story verbatim. And I wanted that. I came back to that meeting. I figured I had to wait a week. I didn't realize I could go to other meetings. I had to wait a week to come back to that one. And when the same things happened, I said, I want this. I'm going to ask them when they do the work of recovery. Just sitting around telling stories is fun and all that, but when do you get sober? And when I asked them that, they go, come here next week an hour early and we'll teach you the handshake and give you the password to get into that meeting. And so I showed up an hour early, and they said, well, let me show you how to make coffee. Now that you're here early, you might as well make coffee. Oh, and then you can set up the chairs around here. And then they walked down the room, left me there. Here's the key. And then they just left. And I went, well, I didn't know. But I kept showing up. I had the key. I had to be there, or somebody would get drunk if I didn't show up. And that was the beginning of the next 14 years of service to me. They taught me humility. They taught me what service means. It's not applying a better idea that I had. I rearranged the chairs one time, and they said, no. We don't like it that way. And they came in and moved all the chairs back the way they were. And I went, okay, I get it. And I learned those lessons. And when I was done making coffee, they said, okay, we want you to do this now. And then they said, we want you to do this now. And I just stayed in my lane. I just kept doing what they told me to do. The only requirement for service is, do you have the time? If you have the time to do it, they'll teach you everything you need to know. Oh boy. This is where I get emotional. I am just, I can't even say the word, grateful for what Alcoholics Anonymous has done for me. They have given me so much. They've taught me so much. They gave me a life. My wife left me after all. She says, I don't want to be married to somebody that can't drink. I'm out of here. And I spent the next 2 years going to Al-Anon to do something productive, because that's what Alcoholics Anonymous said to do. Do the next thing. And that was the next thing. Keep going to meetings. I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful that whenever you put $1 in the basket that goes around, some of that goes to carrying the message, to helping to pay for a poor slob like me that couldn't do it on my own dime, to go represent you all the way back to New York. That kind of generosity, it's just overwhelming to me. I don't deserve that, on some level. And evidently you have, and my higher power does for some reason. He's given me a life that you've given me a life that I am so excited to share with you. Um, Now, my dad's side of the family, all the men die at 75. Well, that's only a couple more years for me. But luckily, the only thing I have in common with my dad's side of the family is my hairline. So, so I'm pretty safe there. I take out to my mother's side of the family. She just recently died at 97. So I figure I've got, not that I'm counting on this, but I figure I got 20 plus more years to hang with you guys. So keep me honest and keep me safe. My life's in your hands.